The largest sea monster ever discovered, a 55-foot serpent with a lion's head and wings like an eagle. It breathes fire so hot that it melts stone. Dozens of these creatures have been captured in ice sheets and perfectly preserved for thousands of years. And there are even rumors of a secret government program designed to study them before they disappeared. Is this just another wild conspiracy theory, or is there something more to these supposed lizard people? Are we really meant to believe that the government has been hiding evidence of enormous fire-breathing lizards that live in the sea? Let us take a look at what evidence we do have and see if we can find out the truth behind the greatest sea monsters of all time. A creature so monstrous that God himself had to step in and stop it. The first mention of Leviathan can be found in the book of Job, where it is described as a monster residing in the depths of the ocean. In fact, it is mentioned 16 times throughout the Old Testament, often referred to as the Chaos Monster. Most descriptions of its appearance are often contradictory or unreliable, but some key characteristics remain constant. For example, it is always depicted as being some sort of serpent-like creature with multiple heads and an enormous size. One passage describes it as having 7 heads and 7 colored wings, while another says that it has 4 wings and 4 faces. This description doesn't seem to match any known animal and may have been based on a misinterpretation of a fossil or a skeleton of an extinct animal. However, one thing that remains consistent throughout all the depictions is that the Leviathan was a sea creature. It is described as living in the seas and oceans and breathing underwater. Some translations even describe it as being able to swim in the depths of the sea, which would indicate that it was an aquatic creature adapted to life in the water. However, the most famous and terrifying characteristic of the Leviathan is its ability to breathe fire. This power is mentioned several times throughout the Old Testament and is perhaps the most defining feature of the monster. According to some texts, the Leviathan's fire was so powerful that it could melt metal and stone. So what exactly does this mean? How could such a creature exist? Well, when we look at other myths and legends from around the world, we see similar themes and motifs. For example, in Greek mythology, there is the Hydra, a many-headed water serpent that also breathed fire. Similarly, in Norse mythology, there is the Jormungandr, a giant serpent that encircles the entire earth and whose breath is poisonous. These creatures may have been inspired by real-life animals such as crocodiles, snakes, or even whales. When we look at fossils of these animals, we can see that they were much larger than their modern counterparts, further adding to the mystery. Could these sea monsters be real animals that lived long ago? Or are they simply figments of our imagination? In order to get to the bottom of this, we must examine the evidence. First off, there is no concrete physical evidence that can prove or disprove the existence of these creatures. The only evidence we have comes from ancient texts and folklore, which are often unreliable. However, there are a few interesting artifacts that have been discovered that may shed some light on the subject. For example, there is the Siloam inscription, an ancient artifact that was discovered in Jerusalem and dates back to the 8th century BC. It tells the story of King Hezekiah's victory over the Assyrians and mentions the capture of a Leviathan. Another artifact is the Teldan stele, which dates back to the 9th century BC and also refers to the Leviathan. Both of these artifacts are considered to be genuine and have been studied by experts. However, they are not the only pieces of evidence we have to go on. There are also a number of ancient drawings and sculptures that depict creatures that resemble the Leviathan. These works of art provide us with a visual representation of how the Leviathan was perceived by ancient cultures and may help us to better understand its significance in their mythology. Another piece of evidence comes from ancient fishermen who claim to have encountered sea monsters. Some of these stories have been passed down through oral tradition and were later written down by folklorists. While these stories cannot be verified, they do provide us with some interesting details about what people believed the sea monsters looked like and how they behaved. One story tells of a fisherman who caught a sea monster that had the head of a lion and the body of a serpent. Another story tells of a fisherman who encountered a creature that looked like a whale but had wings and could breathe fire. These stories may be based on real encounters with large marine animals, but they could also reflect the beliefs and fears of the people who told them. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Leviathan is its supposed connection to the end of days. Many believe that the Leviathan will rise again during the end of days and cause great destruction. This belief is based on a passage in the book of Isaiah, which predicts that God will use the Leviathan as a punishment for the wicked. But what does this mean? Could it be that the Leviathan is not just a mythical creature, but a harbinger of the apocalypse? This idea may seem far-fetched, but it's important to remember that apocalyptic beliefs were common in ancient times. People believed that the end of days was near and that the gods were angry with humanity. This belief was likely influenced by natural disasters and other catastrophic events that occurred throughout history. As a result, many cultures developed myths and legends about the end of days and the monsters that would bring it about. So, is there anything else we can consider? Sure, cryptids are all the rage right now. The idea that there are unknown animals living in the world that have yet to be discovered. Some believe that the sea monster may actually be a cryptid, a creature that exists but has not been proven to exist. There are a number of cryptids that have been reported in the past, such as the Loch Ness Monster and the Kraken. However, there is no concrete evidence that any of these creatures actually exist. The lack of physical evidence makes it difficult to determine whether or not these sea monsters are real. Finally, we must consider the possibility that these sea monsters may not be real at all. They may simply be figments of our imagination, created by our fear of the unknown. Many of the sea monsters described in ancient texts share similarities with real marine animals. For example, the description of the Kraken as a giant squid or octopus is similar to the giant squid that lives in the deep sea today. Similarly, the description of the sea monster with the head of a lion could be based on a misidentification of a seal or a walrus. In these cases, the sea monsters may have been created by people who saw these animals and misinterpreted what they were seeing. As we can see, there is no clear-cut answer when it comes to the question of whether or not sea monsters are real. The evidence is often contradictory or unreliable, and the creatures themselves have never been proven to exist. However, the myths and legends surrounding sea monsters are an important part of human history and culture. They reflect the beliefs and fears of the people who created them and provide us with a glimpse into the past. Ultimately, the question of whether or not sea monsters are real is up to each individual to decide. There is no right or wrong answer, and the truth may lie somewhere in between reality and myth. What do you think? Are these creatures real, or are they just a figment of our imagination? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.